Whipped shea butter is a gorgeous, newbie-friendly DIY, but doing it well is harder than you might think. So in this video, not only am I going to share 3 amazing, all-natural whipped shea butter formulations that you'll be able to whip up in no time, pun definitely intended, I'm also going to reveal my top solutions for the 3 biggest whipped shea butter problems all DIYers run into sooner or later. Plus, I'll be sharing a gorgeous ingredient a lot of shea-loving makers sleep on and then end up liking even more than shea butter once they finally try it. Now, before we dive into the first DIY, we need to talk about the 3 fundamentals of every whipped shea butter formulation. The first being, what are the essential must-have parts of a whipped shea butter? Well, it's mostly shea butter, surprised, and a liquid oil. Shea butter is a fairly firm, solid butter, so the liquid oil softens it up to a lovely, whippable consistency. Now, with just 2 star ingredients, it's pretty important to choose the right one, which brings us to fundamental thing number 2, what sort of shea butter should you use? Broadly, you'll be choosing between unrefined and refined shea butter. Both are lovely, but there are some pretty distinct differences. Unrefined shea butter is a creamy beige color and has a distinct, smoky, nutty sort of smell that is pretty strong and will come through in your final products, especially if you are using a lot of it like we are. Refined shea butter is white and doesn't smell like much of anything. You can also find yellow shea butter, and this is shea butter that has been dyed with Boro tutu root. You can use either refined or unrefined shea butter in these formulations, but to most people, the decision maker is the smell factor. If you aren't certain you enjoy the smell of unrefined shea butter, or if you just want the ability to scent your final product freely without competing with that smoky, nutty smell of the raw shea, I recommend choosing the refined version. And lastly, that third fundamental, what liquid oil should you use? This one is pretty flexible. I recommend choosing something inexpensive and relatively lightweight like sunflower, apricot kernel, or sweet almond oil. And you can, of course, blend different liquid oils as well. Don't overthink this part. As long as the oil you want to use is liquid at room temperature and you like the feel of it on your skin, it'll work. Now that we're all on the same page about the formulation fundamentals, let's dive into our very first whipped shea butter. We're going to make a 30-gram batch, which is roughly 1 ounce. And yes, this batch size is small, and that is on purpose for 3 reasons. First, whipped shea butter is a really rich, potent moisturizer, and a little goes a long way. Second, you should always make a small batch of something if you've never made it before. There are few things more disappointing than using all of your ingredients in a brand new DIY and then you end up hating it. And third, we're making 3 different formulations today. If we made big batches of each of them, we would have 3 times big, and that's a lot. To start, we'll need our 2 essential ingredients. I'm going to use refined shea butter because I want the freedom to scent my body butter however I want. Before you weigh it out, rub a bit of your shea butter between your fingers to make sure it's smooth. If it feels mealy or sandy, I'm afraid it won't work for these formulations. I'll explain why in a moment, but I have linked a formulation in the description box that you can use it in instead. Weigh out 21 grams shea butter. I'm going to use sunflower oil for my liquid oil as it is inexpensive, lightweight, and rich in linoleic acid, which is great for the skin. You'll need 8.7 grams. Now, we could stop there, but let's have a bit more fun. We'll add some vitamin E, a potent natural antioxidant to delay rancidity, and we'll include a wee bit of essential oil for scent. I'm going to use lavender essential oil, but you can use any essential or fragrance oil that's safe at 0.5% in leave-on body products. If you're using unrefined shea butter, make sure you choose an essential oil that works with the scent of the shea butter, as that scent will still come through. You're not going to be able to drown it out with essential oils, so make sure everything plays nice. You'll need 0.15 grams of each. I'm weighing them straight into the sunflower oil since the amounts are so tiny. If you don't have one or the other, or both, just use more liquid oil. Now that we've got our ingredients, it's time to transform them into a jar of creamy, whippy goodness. The method we'll be using today is a bit different from what you might have seen other people do. Rather than melting everything together, we are going to cold process this butter. It's super fast and easy, and it helps prevent one of the biggest problems makers run into with shea butter, graininess. But more on that later. Gather your equipment. You'll need a small, deep bowl that you can whip in, a set of electric beaters with the attachments you'd use to cream butter for making cookies, though you'll need just one of them for these small batch sizes, and a good, flexible spatula for stirring and scraping. Check out the free partner blog post for more details and links for all of these items. Mash up the shea butter in the mixing bowl with one of the beaters. When it's pretty well mashed, fire up the beaters and whip the butter until there are no lumps. Once it's smooth, add the liquid ingredients and whip until creamy and uniform, stopping to scrape down the sides of the bowl and the beater to ensure everything is incorporating. While I whip, let's circle back to the graininess problem. What is it? Why does it happen? And how can we avoid it? Earlier, I said cold processing helps prevent graininess, but why? Graininess happens in butters when they melt and then don't cool properly. The harder, higher melting point fatty acids in the butter just glomp together and solidify too soon, resulting in hard little grains in a butter that is otherwise softer than it should be. So, if the butter never melts, it can't cool in properly and go grainy. But graininess can still happen even with cold processing, so you have to be careful. Making the butter without heat removes one place graininess can happen, but you still have to protect the butter throughout its life by storing it somewhere with a stable temperature. If your whipped shea butter is exposed to temperature fluctuations, like by storing it in a bathroom that gets a bit hotter every time someone takes a shower and then cools down again, it will go grainy over time. If you have a grainy butter, the only way to fix it is to remelt it and then re-cool it properly. This is why your shea butter has to be smooth to start. Because we aren't melting it, any grainy bits that are in the butter will also be in the final product. If your butter is grainy, you'll need to use it in a formulation that melts it first to smooth out those gritty bits. When the body butter is fluffy, creamy, and uniform, you're ready to package it up. It's important to do this right so you don't wreck your lovely, fluffy butter. You'll need to use a wide-mouthed jar or tub and be gentle as you fill it. This is a 50 milliliter tub for a 30-gram batch because we've got a bunch of extra air in there, so it takes up more room than just a plain butters would. Take care not to squish out all that air we just lovingly whipped into the body butter. If the jar is full and there's a bit left over in the bowl, don't try to squeeze it all in there. And there we go. Our first jar of creamy, shea buttery goodness is ready to use. Now, our star ingredient, shea butter, is rich and nourishing, but that richness means lots of shea butter in a formula can make for a final product that feels heavy and oily on the skin, and not everybody likes that. So for this next formulation, we are going to tackle the second big problem makers run into with whipped shea butter. Thankfully, there are quite a lot of different ways to deal with it. Using the first formulation as our base, I'm going to show you one way to drastically reduce how greasy your whipped shea butter is. And the best part? All you'll need is a really common, inexpensive, all-natural ingredient that you probably already have in your kitchen. That ingredient? Well, there are actually 5 to choose from. Cornstarch, arrowroot starch or powder, tapioca starch, wheat starch, or rice flour, or really a different type of silky smooth starch. If you don't already have one in your pantry, you can go buy them at the grocery store. These unassuming, silky powders will seriously lighten up your whipped shea butter, giving it more of a powdery finish, so it feels luxurious and gorgeous instead of heavy and oily. But wait, you can't just dump starch into your body butter. You have to make room for it so your formulation stays balanced and you know how much of everything you're using. To do that, we're going to reduce the amount of shea butter in the formulation and then use that space for our starch. I'm using 15% cornstarch, which is 4.5 grams for this 30-gram batch, but you can definitely play with this percentage. I have used as little as 10% and as much as 40%. Because we've reduced the shea butter to make room for the starch, you'll need 16.5 grams shea butter for this formulation. The sunflower oil, vitamin E, and essential oil amounts all stay the same. Making this second formulation isn't all that different from the first one. Mash and then whip the shea butter, whip in the liquids, and then add the starch at the end. I recommend folding the starch in with your spatula before going in with the beaters so it doesn't poof up everywhere and make a mess. Package the body butter up just like you did last time and voila! Creamy, dreamy, less greasy goodness. If you're having fun and want to learn even more about creating body butters, check out my DIY Skincare for Beginners mini course. There's a completely free version that's perfect for new makers and an expanded paid version that's designed for aspiring formulators. With the free version, you'll learn essential DIYing skills with 6 simple, all-natural formulations, while the paid version includes everything that's in the free version, plus a lot more information about preventing graininess, troubleshooting and adjusting formulations, there's downloadable spreadsheets, and much, much more. Get all the details and sign up with the link in the description box below. Okay, so now we've got a fluffy, indulgent whipped shea butter that's far less greasy, but it's still kind of basic. Dare I say, boring. So let's zhuzh things up a bit with some fancier ingredients you probably already have for this next formulation. Don't worry, you don't need to use all of these new ingredients. You can use just one if you want, and I'll show you how to do that a bit later on. We'll start with our second formulation as our base. Our first new ingredient is super easy. We're going to switch up the liquid oil a bit. Do you have a fancy carrier oil you've been itching to use but haven't been sure what to put it in? That's perfect. I'm going to use 10% raspberry seed oil and leave the rest of the liquid oil as sunflower oil. For this 30-gram batch, that's 3 grams of raspberry seed oil and 4.05 grams sunflower seed oil. Up next, let's add a bit of botanical goodness for some herbal skincare benefits. Now, there are 2 easy ways to do this. The first is to use an herb-infused carrier oil as part of your blend of liquid oils. This can be an infused oil you've made yourself or one you've purchased. And the second way is to use an oil-soluble botanical extract. If you go the extract route, it is super important your extract is oil-soluble, so check the INCI. Water-soluble extracts with a base of glycerin or propanediol are far more common, but those won't work here. Brambleberry has a great selection of oil-soluble extracts. I'm going to use their calendula extract at 5% for a skin-soothing boost. That's 1.5 grams for this batch size. I'm going to weigh that into the sunflower oil along with the vitamin E and lavender essential oil. This next addition is totally optional but fun. We're going to add some color. The easiest way to do this is with a wee bit of a colourful mica. These are available in every color under the rainbow. Just make sure you're purchasing ethically sourced micas. 0.5% is more than enough. Too much will start to turn your body butter into a very messy body lipstick. I'm going to use 0.15 grams of this pretty pink mica to match the raspberry seed oil I added earlier. And the last ingredient. Remember at the start of the video when I teased I'd be sharing a gorgeous ingredient a lot of Shea-loving makers end up liking even more than shea butter once they finally try it? This new ingredient is a butter that's soft and creamy, just like shea butter, but is way lighter and faster absorbing. If you're not a fan of greasy skincare, it just might replace shea butter in your DIY pantry. And what is this creamy yet light butter that'll unlock the luxurious body butters of your dreams? It's mango butter. In this formulation, we're going to blend 7.5 grams of lighter mango butter with 9 grams of richer shea butter. But you can use mango butter as the star of your body butter formulations for much lighter products. I do find mango butter is a bit softer than shea butter, so it isn't always a perfect one-for-one swap, but it's pretty close and downright lovely. Make this third whipped body butter the same way. Mash and then whip the shea and mango butters. Whip in the liquid ingredients, and then fold in the powders, the starch, and the mica before whipping everything together into creamy, dreamy goodness and packaging it up. And here's the cool part. You can mix and match. all three formulations. If you don't want to use any of the liquid ingredients I used, replace them with more of the liquid carrier oil. And if you don't want to use the starch, revert back to formulation number 1 for the shea butter and liquid oil amounts, and then go from there. Have fun with it. Hi, Editing Marie here. As I was putting this all together, I thought that maybe some extra instruction on how to hybridize these formulations could be useful, so I made a patron-exclusive video explaining how to turn these 3 formulations into pretty much an infinite number of whipped shea butter formulations. So if you'd like to check that out, please consider becoming a patron at the exclusive videos tier. Now, before you run off to make these 3 beautiful whipped shea butters, we have to talk about the biggest problem new makers encounter with whipped body butters. What do you do if it is too soft or too hard? Whipped body butters are a Goldilocks sort of formulation, and there's one surprising factor that is key to success or failure. So watch this video next to learn what that is, why it matters so much, and how to fix your too soft or too hard body butters. Bye!